the name of God, the compassionate and merciful. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the new episode of the Fact series in which we discuss international political matters every week. This is Foad Mahdavi, and in this episode, I have the honor of being the host of Dr. Randy Short, a social commentator and international activist from Washington, D.C. We are here to discuss the decline of American power. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Randy Short, and good to be with you. For the first slide, I'd like to ask you to share your perspective about the decline of American power. How do you interpret this story?
From a theological perspective, or for that matter, from the physical science. There's gravity. All great powers rise, and at some point they decline. The same way you're born and you become large, and then you decline. So that happens for Rome, for Greece, for your Sassanid Empire, for the Achaemenid Empire, for the Persian Empire, for the Greeks, for the Romans, for the Spanish, for the Portuguese, for the Chinese, for all empires have a rise, and they reach a pinnacle, and then there is a period in which they have less power. And what determines how a great power loses power depends on its leadership and the economic fortitude, the moral fortitude, the cultural fortitude of that society. If it is lacking in particular moral ethical power, cultural power, economic power, then it only has military power left. In a sense, the United States is a very great nation. Make no mistake about it. I do not hate the country I live in. I have great issues with most countries in the world as a person that believes in God and think that only heaven is a perfect state that people can be in, and even it's not a state. The United States has reached, at least at this point as it's configured, it's reached a point where it is on the decline, in a sense, because of the lack of vision and the moral ethical decline, the cultural decline, and the economic decline. I mean, economic decline comes with all empires if they have fiat currencies, which are often pegged to whether a society will be strong, as the rich steal all the money by destroying the actual value of the money that the ordinary people have as they hoard to themselves. This society weakens economically. This country prints dollars like it's toilet paper without any regard for how things will be paid for. And what ends up happening, like with Rome or any other empire, what they have left to shore up the other soft powers, which are actually more important. The weakest power that any empire has is its military. Every time there's a situation, the military is sent out, or it's analogous to a community. If a community has strong values and love and respect for one another, people don't need to call law enforcement, or they don't have to constantly use force to get people to comply to the rules that make living together proper and right and function. And so if you look at America, it's always at war, always sending soldiers or in a state of bellicosity, even with nations that have no desire for conflict, can end up being on the bad list of an empire. I mean, it could be teeny tiny Ecuador or Jamaica or Panama. The Seychelles, Diego Garcia, the people there all of a sudden were bad and had to be driven off their island so someone could have a base. An empire eventually, like a person, suffers from dementia and arteriosclerosis and other things, and ultimately it's overtaken, and sometimes by entities that it never envisioned, like the United States being invaded through its southern border by marginalized and poor people from all over the world who are not able to live the ideal modern Western first world life, so they come through the border or they bring drugs or whatever in order to come into America and take things back to where they came from or stay here. And due to the corruption, we have a serious corruption problem. Then you have a nation with 22 million undocumented people here. 22 million. That is a nation. That would be 1 in 4 Iranians, if I'm correct. That's so we have a great degree of corruption, and of course, the other issues. So the United States is in its throes of and I think there's a great degree of how can I describe this? Intellectual and moral cowardice because the United States could rebound, but it would have to re-envision itself. This happens in certain empires. The Roman Empire split in East and West in order to sustain itself. What America has, there is a historian by the name of Rediger who talks about a concept of a Herrenvolk democracy, where there was a superior caste or race that ruled over all the other people. Well, like in Rome and like in Greece and like in other empires, when you conquer other people, the demography changes. So if you've conquered people who are not allowed to be part of the majority society, they're always marginal. You've got what, maybe a third of Americans are not really seen as fully American. It may be more than a third, and that number is growing. Pretty soon it'll be half. How do you manage to have a society in which people have no right to belong in or belong to, but they're from there? I just quickly say to you, you may not think so, and you may have been miseducated, but when the people from Europe first came to what's now called America, the United States, many of the people that you call Indians, which is an improper name, looked exactly like I do right now. I look like my great grandmother. My great grandmother was an Indian. I'm saying that to say to you, meaning that before the people got here to write up a constitution or anything else, I had people living here with the same skin color that I've got now before people from Africa were brought here. And yet there are people, I can get stopped by the police and be told I don't belong and where my people have been 5,000 years by someone who just got here, someone who came to the country illegally with the bad ID can tell me I have no business, and this has happened to me many times when I've traveled abroad, and I've had a foreigner tell me I had no right to be in the United States. Multiply me by 75 million or more. God forbid if we weren't getting abortions, and you'd have this huge number of people who don't have, are not fully allowed to be where they're from, based on the myth that they all were brought from somewhere else, which isn't true. After all, the slur word is red skin, not pale skin. But if you look at Western media, the indigenous or the Aboriginal people are represented now in the last 50 years as having very light skin, but the people who were here described people by skin color, described people as pale skin as being European, and red skin was in relation, and I got red skin, but yet due to this scam about who was here first and what's an American, and so this country can't even be honest about who's here where people are from, how do we proceed, how do we go forward. Ultimately, it's not a beautiful ending. If this, what do you do? If 50 or 60 years from now, and the demographics are changing, if people want to have a Herrenvolk democracy, a South Africa or a Rhodesia or a Kenya or whatever, a caste system, that's going to be very difficult. And it's not just the group that I'm in. All these other groups are growing and are not necessarily feeling, particularly with this coronavirus, COVID-19, people that are Chinese or Korean or Japanese or Filipino are feeling a kind of racial discrimination that usually doesn't impact them, which I don't think is going to go away as this American empire begins to, as it started its pivot towards Asia, to fight with the Chinese for global primacy, to maintain it or to prevent China from overtaking them. Then this concept that is not new, but the yellow peril, that the threat to the Western people are the yellow or whatever, tawdry skinned people, then, and they're the fastest growing demographic in the country, there will be 100 million or more of these people. What do you do with a country full of people who are made to feel like they are not fully included, or they're not getting what they'd like, the tangible things in that society? So that is a problem, and I just mentioned before, economically, if you have a worthless fiat currency that is backed up by military might, and you peg everything to the petrodollar, which means that you have to punish countries whose oil isn't pegged to the dollar, such as yours or Venezuela, any country that tries to have a current, or what they did with Libya, any country that tries to have economic might independent of this worthless fiat currency has to be contained, destroyed, sanctioned, undermined. How many years can a country invest almost all of its resources into warfare, occupation, and foreign bases, and our bridges are falling? We don't have ventilators for a health emergency. We have millions of people that cannot read or write, and therefore people from countries that we have bad diplomatic relationships with, the children of the very people that they don't like, are here running all the sensitive areas. This may not resonate with the very powerful elite people who have a concept of being effectively avatars. They're divine based on skin color, my light skin, or if I've got long hair that I can toss, or blue eyes, I'm infallible. If that person is in charge of things, then there'll be a meltdown somewhere. Whether, and trust me, I don't want anything to melt down. I'll hurt just like anybody else, but that's sort of where we are, a conundrum. And the only other thing I'll say to you is that morally and ethically, when you have a country that is in economic competition with China, why is America exporting deviant sexuality, deviant music, deviant art, deviant films, deviant values, instead of selling cars, instead of selling food, something that people really need, and bullying other countries that don't
It's
think
1 o'clock.
that countries that don't think a man is a woman or a woman is a man, or I'm a woman and a man, or I'm a fish, a man and a woman. All of this is going on in this. So we're in a very interesting place of of decline that deals with corruption of the soul, of the economy, of the culture. I would love to direct anybody that can to look at a book. I don't know if you can get Amazon, or maybe I'll send you the link, but it's called Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon. And it talks about how our intelligence agencies and our corrupt elites
Mm.
all have pushed a culture where people practice pedophilia, cannibalism, eating feces, very bizarre, ungodly, abominable behavior, and making this the popular culture. Not my opinion, not my judgment. This is something that can be documented. Empires that do this, great societies that emphasize sex trafficking, pedophilia, drug abuse, sodomy. Um, this ultimately undermines the moral fabric of the nation state or the empire, and it collapses. If I can't tell whether I'm a man or I'm a woman, why would I have the moral ethical fortitude to go into war or to defend my society? If I don't like all religion, there are people here they don't want any religion. You can't believe I'm a god. You and I are a god, brother Fuad. And I always say to people, if you're such gods, can you make some gold for me so I can pay my bills? So this is all happening at one point, and I don't know if the masses of people want it, but there are people who the expressionist is that Nero fiddled while Rome burned. The very rich uber class, it doesn't really matter if America goes down or not. There are people who they want 7.5 billion people to die. They think there are too many people. And so, what kind of elite wants to eliminate its own citizens? uh, uh, Wants to depopulate the world and start all over again. This is the kind of thing that occurs when the elite becomes so rich and so corrupt and so perverse until what they desire and what pleasures them isn't building roads, bridges, universities, or science. It's just a very antisocial, iniquitous, debaucherous behavior and greed, like the derivatives. And no one, nothing, nothing from nothing leaves nothing. It can't be sustained if it's like this. If I can, that's a.
Okay,
Mhm. So
okay, of course, American people are tired of the policy
I
of
don't think you're
the
right
U.S. administration. Am I
for
right?
for a couple of reasons. I understand that there's a great disdain and dislike for President Trump because of things that he says. He's a person that shoots from the hip, or he basically says whatever he thinks. President Trump is far more popular than what you are being led to believe. Um, and people don't like everything about him, but he's not as much of a problem as traitors within his ranks and the people on the other side. Um, I understand the relationship, or should I say, the lack of a relationship between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States is something I'm very unhappy about. I'm just a little nobody, as one Iranian told me. We don't want you nobodies coming to Iran. So I'm a nobody, but my God is someone. So I pray for peace. But you have to understand that the Zionist, or should I say, the Takfiri Christians, who see themselves as basically Bible wielding members of the Mossad, they have an understanding of the Christian faith that they are doing everything that they can to bring about the return of Jesus Christ. And what they've been told by many people in Israel is that Iran is the biggest problem that Israel has, and Iran has to be destroyed so Israel can survive. Now, mind you, I'm not anti Israel, and I'm definitely not anti Iran. I'm pro humanity because that's what God wants, for us to care about humanity. And I understand that there are eschatological agendas and philosophies that Iran has, Israel has. Israel has this plan for expansion. Iran has this thing where they want Jerusalem to have the Mahdi. I'm a Christian. Those aren't ideas I share, but as a Christian, I am not supposed to participate and engage in things that bring about war and suffering, even if it happens, inshallah, God's will, whatever God ultimately allows to happen will happen, but I'm not supposed to actively seek out violence, warfare, and destruction of people. But we have Christians that do, who have taken sides with states, when in reality, you're supposed to be on God's side and to do what God wants, which is to preach the good news of Jesus Christ, love other people as you want to be loved, and do what is right. This isn't how these people, who are the base of Donald Trump's support, are the very, very, they're so pro-Israel. I was at a church service and a Jewish rabbi gave a discussion, and it was so incredible. The guy was saying that the Germans were bombing Jerusalem during World War II. And because he's Jewish and he's saying that Germans were bombing Jerusalem during World War II, you've never heard of it. I'd never heard this before. But do you realize if I had criticized him, I would be seen as an anti-Semite had I questioned him? I've been seen as an anti-Semite. If I didn't look like I understood what he was saying, I'd be an anti-Semite. And what he said is, it doesn't square with history. Are you understanding me? So we almost have a Third World War death cult movement that is very strong in the country. That it goes beyond being pro-Israel. You can be pro-Israel and not believe that the Germans bombed Jerusalem during the Second World War. I mean, but not for them. And they would jump all over me and tell me I'm practicing Nazism for disagreeing. Do you understand? So if they can get German bombers over Jerusalem, then it parallels to my experience of watching the head of the Democratic Party tell people here in Washington that Iran had nuclear weapons in 2005 and were going to use them if America did not destroy Iran first. And I mean, and by the way, it's an APAC event, and they all felt that yes, Iran has a bomb. We say so, and some of this, my friend, relates to what is foreign to you, and racism is Luciferian. It's satanic. It may not impact you like it impacts me, but it's completely wicked and diabolical. And the way it works out is in the case of people in Iran, and I've said this and people don't like it, they have an expression, dune coons, sand niggers. When people have effectively made Iranians a type of black person or black people, they're worthy of mass destruction because they're not white, even though Iran, I mean, but what difference? The truth is, they say so, it's so. You're not white people. You deserve what you get. Uh, and no, in fact, in me saying anything, well, I'm just another type of subhuman, so I don't count either. when you have had 500 years of this, where you've taught people that they are genetically better and other people don't deserve to exist, um, it's not easy to get people to see humanity or to think rationally or fair or diplomatically towards this group of subhumans, as I said, sand niggers. And I don't think that's understood in Iran. In fact, I'm certain that people don't understand. There's a very good documentary that Al Jazeera did on the Iranian Revolution. And a man, basically, a white gentleman, said, hey, look, we looked on the Iranians in Abadan the same way we looked at blacks. They take their oil, kill them, beat them up. That's what you do to them. That's what you do in England and Australia, New Zealand, and America and Canada. You do that to your subhuman brown or black people. You tramp them underfoot.
Many analysts see Trump's rise to power in the United States as weakening, ridiculing, and deteriorating
It
U.S. foreign
depends.
policy. Do you
See,
think
the
so?
foreign policy of the United States isn't determined by the president. The foreign policy is the same no matter who's in office. If there have been hostile and unfair relations with Iran, there were hostile and unfair relationships, let's go back, with Eisenhower, then with Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, Bush, right? Clinton, Bush 2, Obama, and now it's Trump. It's always unfair. The foreign policy that's being dictated by the Council on Foreign Relations and the real power are not the elected leaders in this country. You've got the Supreme Islamic Council that is over Rouhani. We've got something among the super rich, the plutocratic, the 400 richest families are sort of like what I could call the American Supreme Council. And they're the ones that dictate policy. The presidents are basically actors. However, in Trump's credit, even if you don't like it, and I understand why, and I love my friends in Iran, and I don't want a war. We would have had a war with Iran had Hillary Clinton been president. It would have already happened. We would have had a war in Syria had Trump not been president. We would have had a war in Yemen. Even though I hate all of these things, I don't want any of it to happen. If I had a magic wand and I could make all this stuff stop, I would do it, brother. I don't have that capacity.
Okay, thanks for joining us again, dear Dr. Randy Short, and I do really appreciate for your rich words due to your noteworthy remarks. Although you mentioned something that I might disagree with, but no matter, indeed. I hope things are going well with you and your work far away from anything negative. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Dear audience, it was another talk with Dr. Randy Short, a social commentator from Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching and goodbye.